In this program, we will look at arrays of structures. To begin with, let's look at a program we did previously and briefly let's review that. So in this example, we had a student record, and that student record was composed of a hierarchical structure. There is the structure for date, which had the month, the day, and the year. And here is a structure student record, and within that we had the structure date. So that's a hierarchical structure. We will also use these functions that were used in previous programs. Let's scroll down and look at those briefly. Here is a function to enter data by value, and the variable student is passed by value. The type of the function has to be the same type as the return, so it has to also be a type student record. And this function just prompts you to enter the data to fill up one student record. Here is an equivalent enter data function, but in this case, the information is passed by reference, see the ampersand. It also is used to fill up a student record, but because we're using call by reference, the return statement returns nothing. The data goes back through that variable there, which is the formal parameter for student. We also had the compute grade function with call by reference as before, and this is just a function that will print out the contents of one student record. And since we don't need this function to do anything but print out, it's okay for it to be a void type. Now, let's extend this program so that it can handle an array of structures. So you've seen arrays before. We've had arrays of different types. How can we use an array where the type is a structure? Well, the same way as we did everything else. So let's go ahead and declare a type student record. So student record. And let's call this CS121 students. And to keep it simple and to cut down on the typing, let's just suppose we have 5 students. So you can declare an array, which is a structure type, in the same way that you would declare any other kind of an array. Okay. Now, to illustrate how we can access the individual parts of this structured array, let's take the first student, and we'll just call him George, and let's fill in his information. The additional thing we have to be concerned about here is now we have an array of structures instead of just a simple student like Bob or Alice. Now, let's type some lines here that will initialize this. So CS121 students, well, CS121 students, that's right. And the first one is of course, at index 0. Well, the record for the first student in the array is going to have all of these elements or members of this structure that we see here. So the additional thing that we have to have other than the dot product is we have to include the square bracket and the index of the student that we're referencing. So let's just fill in some information. Okay, so we'll do first name equals, okay, so I'll make up some information. We'll do George. And to save me a bit of typing, I'm going to copy and paste the first part of this. Let's try that again. And then I'll just put in the other parts. Okay, so George Mason. Now, notice that we still have the dot product, well, the dot, it's not really dot product, the dot notation here. And preceding that, we have the index for which student we're referencing there. So you put the index, the square brackets and the index first, then the dot, and then the member element of the structure. All right, now let's just go ahead and fill in some of these other parts here. So we have, in this case, we have birth date, and that's the hierarchical structure. Okay, so month, and let's just suppose that's June. And let's continue to fill in the birth date, day, It's the 21st. Okay, birth date, finally the year. And let's set that to 2000. And we'll continue to fill in the other parts of this. We have the grade point average, GPA, and we'll set that equal to 3.4. On down the list, exam average. The exam averaged 89.5. Homework average. Let's set the homework average to 92.5. You can make up your own numbers here if you want. And then we would need to compute the grade, and then we'd be done with it. So this illustrates then how you can access an array of elements that are a struct type. Okay, so we have CS121 students, there are 5 of them, and each of those 5 students has all of these members of the struct. So we access them using the square brackets, the index, and then the dot notation to get to each individual field for each individual student. Now, we have some functions that we can use to calculate the grade. So let's go ahead and do that. We can do compute grade. So compute grade. Oh, now, how do we do this? How do we pass this information into our function? Okay, well, the compute grade function only understands a single student. Okay, so it's expecting a single student here. So we wouldn't send in the array of all the students. We have to send in one at a time. So in this case, we'll call compute grade and we'll just send CS121 students, index 0 for George. There's a semicolon there. So that will compute and fill in the grade member for George. Okay, now we can now call the print array function and we can print out George's information, or let's just wait and print them all out together down here. All right, so this illustrates then the syntax and the technique for using a array of structures. Let's call our function enter data by value in order to enter the data for the rest of them. So let's put a for loop here. I think I've got a k declared. Yes, I do. Okay, so for k equals 1, we just did index 0 for George, so we don't need to do him again. Okay, k less than 5, k plus plus. And here we will just call the function enter data by value. And you know what? I want to use the enter data by reference here. So I want to use that function instead. Okay. So enter data by reference. And as we go through the loop, we'll just increase the index and go through all the students, all 5, or the students 1 through 4, 1 through 5, that we still have to do. So CS121 students, bracket index k. All right, now when we call that function, we will have to type all that in because we have all these CN statements. So that'll take a little bit of time, but this illustrates the technique. Then after we've entered the data for all the students, we will print them out. We have a function that does that. Okay, so here's our print record. We'll just call it 5 times and we'll print out the information for all 5 students. Okay, so let's do an end line here that will separate the things out. And we need another end line, that's an L. And we'll put another for loop here. This time k starts at 0 because we want to get George's information. K less than 5, k plus plus. Print record. And the argument this time, print record, also expects just one student record. So CS121 students, bracket, k, close bracket, semicolon, and we're done. Alrighty, So let's see if this compiles. It does compile. That's good news. So now let's execute our program. It is taking a few seconds to get going. Okay, so now we have this. Let me make that a little bit larger if I can. Let's make the font bigger. Okay, font. Okay, so we have we call function compute grade. This was to compute the information for George. Now we need to run through and we need to enter 4 more students. So I'm just going to make up some information. And my typing is not too good. Okay, Jim Johnson. Okay, birth date. Let's do 12/21/1998. Grade point average 3.2. Enter exam average, and I'll just do some quick numbers here. Homework average 90. And now we're still in the loop to type in all the data for another student. So now I'll need to move on to the second student. I'll make up another student's name, date of birth. Let's say April 25th, 1999. Grade point average 3.5. Exam average 91. Homework average 89. And we'll move on to the third student. Okay, let's do Jerry. Jerry Stokes, date of birth, March 15th, 2000. Grade point average 3.1. Exam average 8. Homework average, say 79. And we're getting near the end. First and last name. Okay, so let's do Lanny. Okay, date of birth about July the 12th of 98. Grade point average 3.4. Homework average 90. That's exam average. Now homework average 89.5. And that is the last entry. So now we call the print function, and you can see that each record is printed out. So we have George Mason, you have the date of birth, and here's Jim Johnson. This one, I forgot to call the compute grade function. So in the function where we're filling in the data, we're typing in the data, I forgot to call that. So that's why this isn't computed. But you can see all the other data is printed out. All right, so let's close this, and let me just quickly go down and let's do our enter data by reference. At this point, I should call compute grade. Compute grade. And I'm passing in the parameter student. That's what I want to fill up. That particular member I want to fill up. And that will correct the problem that you saw earlier where the grade was printed out as some nonsensical huge number. So by adding this, that takes care of it. Okay, well, you can stop this video and rewind it and go through it as many times as you want to, but that's the idea behind arrays of structures. They're not very difficult at all. As long as you remember, just put the index here before the dot in the dot notation.